Welcome back to Manchester Online. I'm delighted to say we're trying something new this afternoon, and we've got three guests who will be answering your questions. Questions which are related to English language teaching. We've called it everything you always wanted to know about English language teaching, and with Catherine Walter, Carol Reed, and Jeremy Harmer, I think we've got the people who can answer those questions. And I'm going to start off, actually, Jeremy, with a very general question to kick things off. In 2015, why choose English language teaching as a career?
I can think of two straightforward reasons. The first is teaching someone how to communicate with other people is a joy, and it's important, and it's something you can feel proud of doing and proud to be involved in. And the other reason I'd say is because teaching language gives you an opportunity for almost any engagement and kind of topic you want, and you can have a wonderful time. It's not the money.
Not the money. Carol?
I think it's also a basic part of the kind of intercultural competence that anyone really needs in the 21st century. And I would also say, particularly with children, anyone who's interested in education, that learning another language at a young age opens up more than just, for utilitarian reasons, develops, the brain thinking skills in ways that will equip children for the future.
Great, and Catherine?
And English has become a life skill like mathematics or information technology. So you're giving people a skill that they'll be able to use for the rest of their lives. So that's quite a lovely gift to be able to give.
Yeah, and of course all this, the growth of English, obviously, in especially in recent years, means there's a demand for a greater number of teachers, and one of the debates which has certainly, I would say, come to the surface in the last year in particular, is around this question of native speaker teachers, non-native speaker teachers, and some of the limitations it seems that there are out there still for non-native speaking teachers. Catherine, you're shaking your head. Kind of.
It's based on such a misconception to think that any first language speaker of English will be a better teacher than any second language speaker of English. I would venture to say, I am certain, in fact, that there are more good second language speaker teachers of English in the world than good first language speaker teachers of English in the world. First of all, because there are more second language speakers who are teaching English. And I would much rather have someone who knows about English and who knows about teaching and who is a compassionate person who is devoted to this profession, whose first language doesn't happen to be English, than to have any old person who happens to speak English and is hired on that basis, on the misguided assumption that they are automatically going to be better at teaching the language.
Absolutely. I mean, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. Teachers who have English as a second language, they've undergone the experience themselves of learning English. That's one thing. And they also have a high level of sensitivity to the particular language difficulties encountered because they share the same first language, and also, are able to use that judiciously and appropriately in class. So in a way, the debate is actually a false debate. I mean, it's really to do with competencies, both teacher competencies and language competence, but not to do with what your first or second language is.
Yeah. I mean, one question that's come up as well related to this is how can you change the mindset of say, employers or parents who might perhaps request for a native speaker teacher? Is there anything we can do about that?
I think there is. I just wanted to say I came into the business of teaching English at the age of 24 when, to my shame, it never occurred to me to question a natural superiority I must have being a first language English speaker. And so I did a course which I knew would enable me to work anywhere in the world. And the big learning experience I had was many years ago. I was director of a large language teaching institute in Guadalajara in Mexico, and 40% of our teachers were Mexican and 60% of our teachers were British, Australian, American. And regularly at the beginning of every semester, when we had assigned teachers to classes, I would have people banging on my office doors saying, "We want to complain. Our teacher is a Mexican. We want a native speaker." I mean, a deeply, deeply held prejudice of the kind that we've been talking about. And I would say, actually quite truthfully, I would say there is nothing I can do about this today, because new semester, classes in chaos all over the place. If you still feel the same way in a week or two, do come and see me again and I'll see what I can do. And with almost no exceptions, they never came back, because the Mexican teachers, we didn't hire bad teachers, we hired good teachers. I've just been filming for a book I've done, and we filmed in the UK, but we also filmed in Mexico and Turkey. Brilliant teachers doing a brilliant job, speaking really good English, but recognizably with an accent that's neither like mine and Carol's or like Catherine's. So I agree the debate has gone away for people who think about it properly, but it hasn't gone away, you're quite right, for parents and school owners, and it hasn't gone away for the situations which drive me crazy, where people can go to a country like Korea who have no teaching experience at all and will get a job. Over and above highly trained. How do you change the mindset? I think you go to parents first. You educate parents and you tell them and you talk and you show them teachers teaching who are not first language English speakers. I mean, we could go on about this one subject pretty much the whole time, but that, I think, is sort of what I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think we need to surface and make explicit the points that Catherine was making and Jeremy was making, and make sure that we communicate them to clients, parents, and also to children. And in an increasing, in our increasingly mobile world, it is increasingly the case. There is an ever increasing number of teachers who speak 1, 2, 3 languages, and that it's the competence that counts.
And if I can just add one more thing.
Sure.
Another thing we can do is to model good behavior. And that's something that the British Council has done, because the British Council does not only hire first language speakers of English to teach in its teaching centers. It hires proficient speakers of English who are good teachers.
And I'd like to add one more thing. As I say, we could go on forever, but it was a quote I picked up from Suresh Kanagaraja about this issue, and he said, we have to educate people into realizing, this is something I think you said we have to educate people. The native speaker model, and I'm using that term now deliberately, the native speaker model is almost a kind of monolingual kind of model, but actually the world is full of multilinguals.
Exactly.
And it's the multilingual model that matters. And Catherine is absolutely right when she said 5 minutes ago or something like that having English is a life skill. But it's a life skill amongst many other life skills, some of which are speaking Tamil and Spanish and everything else.
Absolutely.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second because a question has just come in while we're talking, and I'd just like to thank you for sending in this question, Emra, which is continuing to ask about what we've just discussed, really, very much linked to this. Emra says, do you think it's a must to be taught by native speakers to have native-like proficiency? And I guess this raises all sorts of questions about who wants native-like proficiency. Should we be seeking that kind of proficiency?
Well, that may not even be the goal, so I'm not sure that that's essential at all. I mean, what you're looking for is a level of professional competence, if you like. But by using that word native, you're already, making that comparison, and that's not necessarily the outcome that people want or need in this day and age. Why would you want to be like a native speaker? You want to be able to communicate and be fluent and make yourself understood, but not necessarily that.
It's a question that's not come in, but it wouldn't surprise me if it does. So I related to this as well. Which English do we teach? If that's the case, if we're not looking for native-like proficiency, where do we start as teachers?
I'd like to say two things here. First, to add what Carol says, I mean, I think we have to distinguish between model and target. you choose a model of English to teach, and that may be particularly as regards vocabulary, as regards pronunciation. I mean, you can obviously give alternatives, but in a course, if you're teaching pronunciation, you're not going to teach British pronunciation on Monday, Australian pronunciation on Wednesday, and American pronunciation on Friday. For production, obviously you're going to teach people to understand all these pronunciations, and you're going to teach people to understand pronunciations of people who are not first language speakers of English, because that may very well be the people that they are going to be in touch with. But that's model. You want to be consistent in terms of the model you use, and how that model is chosen is going to depend on a series of factors having to do with the students in the class. It might have to do with the educational system, choices that are made in that country, trading partners, all sorts of things. That's the model. But the target, unless you happen, and maybe some of our listeners are, unless you happen to be teaching spies, few people are learning English in order to pass for someone who is a first language speaker of English. When I speak French, my French is pretty good, but I don't try to pretend I'm French. When I speak French, what I'm saying with the French I speak is, I honor your language, I've done my best to learn it, I've got a range of vocabulary, my grammatical mastery is pretty good, but guess what? I'm an American, and
Yes.
that's
Exactly.
obvious in the way I speak. I always feel slightly uncomfortable with people. I mean, unless they're spies, that's a legitimate life choice. But most people, I think, want to sound like educated speakers of English of their own culture and nationality.
Well, this really touches on identity issues, doesn't it, as well? You know, first language identity and second language identity, and all kinds of motivational issues there as well. Although very often in the kind of public perception, you know, when people, you know, that kind of pronunciation and are you native, like that's something that in the public domain, you know, is very much valued and appreciated. You know, and I think we know it ourselves in the languages we speak. We're very proud if anyone remotely thinks, you know, we might not be English, for example.
I was going to say to this two things. First is, here we are at the IATEFL conference, one of the great annual gatherings for me and for all three of us, I think.
Yes.
I'm sitting here feeling slightly queasy about discussing this topic because there are three people here and we're all...
Absolutely.
By the way, I don't feel guilty about it. I have
No.
no guilt about being a first language speaker or a native speaker. That's just how it turned out. But I wanted to lead on to say that, you know, we network all over the place in this conference. We meet people from all over the world. Every single one of the people I've met, with I think no exceptions that I can think of, speaks really good English. But some of them sound Brazilian, and some of them sound Kazakhstani, and some of them sound Russian, some of them sound Italian. There's people from all over the world speaking really good English. What model should you teach? Well, in the end, the students of the people I've met here will speak like their teacher, mostly, until they start moving into higher echelons. The model that students get is the teacher's model, and if that teacher is a good speaker of English, who may have a slightly Brazilian Portuguese accent, those kids are going to speak English with a Brazilian Portuguese accent. I think it was something that you wrote, Carol, or I heard you talk about this, I quoted it in a book the other day, this funny thing about how good kids are at imitating their teacher. They just do it without thinking.
Yes.
So that's the model those kids are going to get. And if you're a teacher in Madrid who's got a bit of a Madrid accent, but you speak perfect English, well, that's a bit how kids are going to sound. It gets much more complicated, of course, when people start wanting international qualifications. And then, well, if you are going to take a Cambridge test, well, if that's what you want, and if that qualification will give you some advancement in your life, well, you'd better adhere to the kind of model that test represents. And that's a whole other conversation,
exactly,
of course.
but it's not then the model that matters, it's the kind of intelligibility and your ability to communicate and get your message across, whether you have, you know, a little, you know, slight accent of any kind. And we all have slight accents of any kind. I mean, David Crystal, when he was talking the other day, he was talking about how in England, you know, accents change every 25 miles. You know, so it's not something that you could ring fence and we're all going to have our individual
Absolutely.
accents.
Okay, well, thanks for your comments on that. I'm going to turn to the camera again just to say thank you for another question that has just come in. And I'm sorry if I don't get your name right, but I can see that your username, I think, is Anna, WH. I hope so anyway. Thanks for your question. Anna's question is coming back to the issue of teachers. And Anna's asking, does the panel think that a qualified teacher is usually a better teacher? Any takers?
You went a bit quiet at that point.
Well, it depends on what you mean by qualified.
Yeah.
Right, so
Exactly.
we have to define what we mean by
Exactly.
qualified.
Yeah.
If it's a reputable qualification, that's the way to bet.
I've got absolute. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
That's all.
No.
I'm sorry.
Go on then.
I do not believe that teachers are born, not made. I just don't believe it. I think anyone who has the basic characteristics of empathy, curiosity, responsibility can be a good teacher. And the danger of saying no qualifications and it doesn't matter is that the only thing teachers will learn from is gut instinct and experience. And that's fine, but experience is simply experience. It's just
Exactly.
having an experience. And unless
Exactly.
there's some way of thinking about structuring, realizing what's gone on, then you're in danger of repeating the same experience
Exactly.
forever. So for me, it's not a question of qualifications, but it is a question of some kind of involvement in reflection and training and professional development.
And for me, I think what's important is the qualifications, because sometimes in some contexts you do hear of very sort of academically driven programs for teachers, and it's one thing knowing about it and another thing knowing how to do it. And so qualifications for me, that essential bit is the having an opportunity to be in the classroom, to try it out, to reflect, as Jeremy says, to improve. And even if you've got, the personality skill, the personality factors are undoubtedly there, but on their own, you're not going to go very far down that road, I think.
Yeah. Unequivocal on this.
Yep.
Yeah. Great. I'm gonna move on to the next question. Actually, we're gonna change focus a little bit, and I'm gonna turn to the camera again, just to say thank you to Sassy this time for your question. Sassy's, sorry, not Sassy. Anya. I'll come to you in a moment, Sassy. Anya actually directed this question to you, Jeremy, but I'll open it out for all of you afterwards. And this is more specifically about what teachers do in the classroom. And Anya's asking, what would be your favourite lesson teaching English, Jeremy, in terms of ingredients or approaches or tools, techniques that you would use?
I did an interview here in this place 2 days ago, and I'm afraid I'm going to tell you the same thing I said then. And this is directly as a result of the pre-conference event that we held, the poetry day. And this is an activity that Alan Maley brought to us. And it's perfectly simple. You put students in groups, and each group gets a poem. And they have 20 minutes to decide how to perform the poem to the rest of the class, and that's all that you do. And what they have to do then is decide whether they want to stand up, sit down, read it in chorus, read it individually, act it out or whatever. In the process of doing this, you discuss the words, you make sure you know what they mean, you repeat the lines again and again, you have fun and you laugh and things like that. And the reason that's the second time I've quoted that in this little studio, is because it seems to me to encapsulate what a really satisfying, kind of organically rich experience language learning can be, and it's almost it's unbelievably cheap. If you see what I mean, in terms of teacher investment, and you just have to choose good poems which work.
Yeah, and I think there are some principles there as well, that you're actually providing a framework, but a framework that is kind of minimal. So it's not teacher heavy, teacher led. It allows for choice, it allows for autonomy, it allows for options in different outcomes. But at the same time, there is that scaffolding there that's needed. And the only ingredient I would add, and I'm sure Alan did this with you, is to make sure that they're motivated and interested and curious and wanting to perform that poem. So maybe there are things like, who is my audience going to be? Because if they're not interested in performing the poem, you're onto a loser at the beginning. But lovely activity. Yeah, very nice.
Catherine.
It's a great activity, and as described, it's a meaning-focused activity.
Exactly.
And I would just call us back a little bit to perhaps Paul Nation's classification of the way that time should be spent in the classroom, that perhaps around that activity there might be some language-focused learning.
Sure.
Because you've got meaning-focused input, meaning-focused output, and you've got fluency development because they're practicing the poem in order to perform it. The one thing that might be missing is a bit of language-focused learning, which might be provided in the course of the activity by the teacher going around and answering questions,
but it might
or which might be before, it might be afterwards. But I think to make it a fully rounded lesson, I would feel more comfortable if there were some language-focused
I'm very
learning
sympathetic
there.
to that, by the way. I think you're absolutely right. It seems to me, we've been in this field for some time, all three of us, and the great unresolved issue is exactly how explicit teachers need to be and how focused on language they need to be. And we argue about this. I mean, from the first IATEFL conference I ever came to, which was about 100 years ago, that argument was current then, and it's still current now. But I completely understand what you're saying.
Well. Absolutely, yeah. But it's also, you're going to approach that in different ways at different moments in different lessons, and also, of course, it's age related.
Sure.
It might, with children, it might be anyway unanalyzed chunks that you don't want to go into unpacking, for example. But yeah, absolutely. There usually is a moment when you want to home in there on some specific language and skill building as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much for your answers on that. I'm going to take just a moment again. We're almost out of time, but I want to say thanks to Ely, I think it is. Again, I hope I've got your name right. Ely, you've been asking, or you've been comparing the language level and skills of teachers who you're working with on a MOOC, which I believe is shaping our landscape, or shaping one landscape. And you're saying that the difference in those skills between teachers in that MOOC and teachers who you see or hear from here at IATEFL is quite high. So I guess the question Aid is asking is, can IATEFL open up? Can this kind of conference open up to even more teachers? And I think the point Aid is trying to make is that there is still a gap between the vast majority of teachers around the world who are teaching English, many of them while we're speaking now, and those of us who are here at the conference. How do we bridge that gap as a professional organisation? It's a difficult question, I know, it's a tough question.
Can I just say something, and then I'll bow out and let the other two, I think, answer this. But in case those of you watching don't know, I'm sitting next to two past presidents of IATEFL, and in both cases the mission has always been, and I'm an ambassador, but I'm just a member. The mission has always been, and it's a profound mission, to try and open up what we do to people around the world. And and what we're doing right now is something which, when I started coming to IATEFL, was unthinkable. That people could come and watch a whole range of presentations, all the plenaries, and be involved in this incredible family that IATEFL is. It's the most beautiful family, and you can now access it even if you're sitting in Cape Town and have no chance of flying here or wherever it happens to be. And I admire the work that they have done in this respect enormously, because it's what we're here for.
I think in some ways it is the future, but not the only future. I mean, I think a kind of blended solution is likely to be around for quite a while. The kind of face-to-face, and the mix. And as software and platforms improve, we can, I mean, it's thanks to the British Council and our collaborative partnership with the British Council that we reach so many people around the world with this conference. I mean, last year, as you know, Rob, we had 80,000 delegates online, and we're hoping to, you know, beat that this year. But I still understand there is that gap. But I mean, even thinking, you know, this is the first time you've run a panel like this. I mean, this also is, in a way, you know, more interactive than you've had online before. You've been taking questions from Twitter as they come in. We've been responding. I imagine, you know, if this format, if you feel it works, we'll be doing more of that next year, and so on. So there is a momentum, and I think within IATEFL, and I understand also in the British Council, we do realise that this is giving us a means to reach people who can't come to Manchester. I mean, we know in some countries around the world, some associate, you know, teachers get together, they rent an internet space in an internet cafe for the days of the conference, and there they are together, you know, watching all of this. Well, how wonderful is that? Indeed. And next year you have we have our 50th anniversary
for online,
and it's the
well,
10th anniversary of online, and you know, we're going from strength to strength in that respect. Personally, I don't see the face-to-face disappearing altogether, because, like it or not, there is something very magical about that human contact, and you know, but increasingly we are able to bridge the gap.
We're almost out of time, but Catherine, I'd just like
very
you to have the
quickly to
last
say,
word.
IATEFL is not just the conference.
Exactly.
IATEFL makes contact with
Catherine.
teachers around
Lovely.
the world throughout the year in many different ways, both face-to-face and with digital means.
Yes.
And so it's a bit of a reflex to say IATEFL and think conference, but this is only a part of IATEFL's very great outreach activity to people around the world.
Can I jump in?
Just to say for the viewers out there, we run, you know, IATEFL monthly webinars. We had a very successful web conference in October. We'll be running our second one this October. Our 15 special interest groups are running webinars on a regular basis. So there are, you know, 3 or 4 a month from different special interest groups. And these are all freely available to anyone, whether they're a member of IATEFL or not. After a week or so, they are archived on the site for members, but anyone can join in watching those. Yeah.
Great. And
Well, I don't have much to add, except I think they have every right to feel very proud of themselves, and so does the British Council. And because, you know, those of us who do have the great good fortune to travel a lot, we travel to IATEFL organisations in all these different countries, all the affiliates. There are, as you say, incredible workshops going on all over the world, and you come across them pop over in all sorts of places. I love the online world, I love what we do, I love the webinars, but you're right. Teachers meeting together, talking face to face, finding out that they have the same problems and sometimes the same solutions, having a good old moan and a good old celebration. There is nothing better, and the online world is getting close to being as good as that, but it will never match teachers getting together. And if, you know, if there was one message you could give the entire teaching profession, it's, you know, you just have to work out more and more ways of people getting together and just meeting each other and talking.
And I would actually say the same thing about teachers and children. That actually, you know, if you're learning online in our increasing, you know, digitized technological age, that actually you can't replace that human factor of a teacher interacting, caring for, motivating, inspiring, and all those things our learners, you know, which is what we're all here for, these 4 days, sharing our ideas on exactly how to do that.
And thank you all for sharing your ideas as well. And I'm sorry I have to draw it to a close.
Thank you.
But yeah, and I'd just like to finish by thanking Julie, who's just tweeted, I believe, that or just commented, saying that this event and what we're doing at the moment is truly admirable. And I think it is great that people who are not here have this direct contact. However difficult it might be technologically to set it up sometimes, we really appreciate that you're listening, watching and sending in your questions too. So thanks again to the panel, and thank you for watching, and we'll be back very shortly with more interviews.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, that last question